This is definitely my most unfair comparison yet. These are probably the two most different train systems in Canada, and I think we'd all know who would win if I declared a winner, but I think that it's a good opportunity to compare two different sides of the spectrum. And because they're the last two major cities that I have to compare, so stay tuned for the mega ranking of all 6. I've lived and commuted on the O train for 2 months, and I've been to Vancouver twice. So with my hefty qualifications established, let's get on to the comparison. I'm going to give a quick overview of both systems, and then I'll compare them for cost, speed, frequency, accessibility, vastness of service, innovation, safety, and ridership. So first off, we have the Ottawa Light Rail Transit System, or the O, run by OC Transpo. It consists of 3 lines: Line 1, or the Confederation Line between Tunney's Pasture and Blair, Line 2, or the Trillium Line between Bayview and Limebank, and Line 4 between South Keys and the airport. These last two opened and reopened, in terms of the Line 2, in January of 2025, so I haven't had a chance to ride them yet. Line 3 is also expected to open in 2026, so we can probably expect it by at least 2028. These are the current hours of those different lines. Next, we have Vancouver's Skytrain, run by TransLink. It consists of 3 lines: the Expo Line, the Millennium Line, and the Canada Line. There's also the C-Bus, which is a passenger ferry, and the West Coast Express, which is commuter rail. I'll be focusing mainly on the Skytrain for this video, but those are also interesting parts of Vancouver Transit, especially the C-Bus. The Skytrains run from around 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. and start a little bit later on weekends. I also want to mention that the Metro Vancouver population is just over 3 million, while the Metro Ottawa-Gatineau region is just under 1.5 million. So these are cities with vastly different budgets and geographies and histories, so keep that in mind as I get on to the comparison. In terms of cost, a single fare in Ottawa will cost $4 unless you're paying in cash, in which case it's 5 cents extra. The transfer time is 90 minutes from payment. Ottawa uses the Presto card, which is also used by the TTC in Toronto, so you don't need to buy a new card if you're moving between those two cities. You can add monthly passes on your Presto cards, and the current fares for those are listed here. In Vancouver, the pricing is a little bit more complicated. They use a similar zoning system to Montreal, actually, which I think is funny because they're also the only 2 major transit systems that are in cities surrounded by water. Fares in Zone 1 vary from $2.25 to $3.35 depending on your age and method of payment, which I'll get into in a sec. Fares that reach Zone 3 range from $4.50 to $6.60, and then monthly passes range from $110 to $200 for adults depending on the zone. They are around $64 for all zones for youth and seniors, and you can load these passes onto a Compass card. Those are a lot of numbers, but compared to Ottawa, Vancouver's Zone 1 fares and youth monthly passes are cheaper, while almost all other fares are more expensive. Both systems have the option to use cash, their respective cards, whether that be the Presto or the Compass, or contactless payment, which means you can just tap your credit card on the fare gates and automatically be charged the equivalent of a single adult fare. Both trains have a maximum speed of around 80 kilometers per hour, but an average of around 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, depending on which line you're on. At peak hours, the frequency of the O train is around 5 minutes, while the Skytrain ranges from every 2 to 6 minutes, depending on the line. I very fittingly have to go catch a train, so I will see you in a bit. I'm on the train. In terms of accessibility, both systems have elevators at all of their stations and cooperative seating or wheelchair space of some sort. The OC Transpo website mentions a bunch of other features like tactile tiles, warning strips, and braille for blind users. It also apparently has heated and slip-resistant flooring. Now obviously, TransLink and OC Transpo are going to speak favorably about their respective transit systems and their accessibility features. So I decided to consult Reddit to see what people's actual concerns are regarding accessibility. For Vancouver, the main complaint seems to be the elevators being shut down for maintenance, but there is an alerts page that updates when this happens. And for Ottawa, the main complaint seems to be the lack of clear signage or planning surrounding construction or detours, which affects everybody and seems to cause a lot of frustration. For vastness of service, Ottawa has 3 LRT lines, 25 stations, and 35.5 kilometers of track. A new line, 16 new stations, and 27 kilometers of track are currently under construction. The Skytrain has 3 lines, 54 stations, and almost 80 kilometers of track, which is the longest in Canada. A 6-kilometer extension of the Millennium Line and a 16-kilometer extension of the Expo Line are currently in the works. It's probably the hardest category to compare the two cities because they are vastly different sizes. So I'm going to look at 3 different categories that I think are important for a city's transit system to have, and those are connectivity to the airport, the universities, and the suburbs. These are obviously heavily biased by the way that I use transit, and so I'd be very curious to see what parts of the city you folks think are important for transit to serve. Both cities now have trains that connect their airports. Ottawa's Line 4 opened fairly recently. The transit from the airport to downtown is often people's first impression of a city's transit system. Being able to move seamlessly between different forms of transportation is really important, whether that be from trains or planes or cars or boats. In terms of major universities, U Ottawa and Carleton in Ottawa are both on the O train lines, while both UBC and Simon Fraser University, which are the major universities in Vancouver, are not on the Skytrain lines. Vancouver is at a disadvantage in that its major universities are farther away from the city centers, but these routes are some of the most used in the city. They are busy, and there's been a lot of advocacy for an extension to UBC in particular. Finally, the suburbs. The Skytrain connects Vancouver to several suburbs such as Burnaby, Surrey, Coquitlam, and Richmond, but there are still areas that have virtually no coverage, like the North Shore, South Surrey, and Langley, at least until the Expo Line extension is finished. While the O train reaches some of Ottawa's suburbs, like Westboro and the edge of Orleans, it still misses major areas like Canada and Barrhaven, which are only served by bus, though construction is underway to expand westwards towards Canada. I used to commute from Barrhaven though, so I would really appreciate if the north-south line got extended down there. So for the most part, Vancouver does have more train infrastructure and reaches more key areas, but Ottawa is continuing to expand. I've already talked about some of the new projects and extensions underway, but in terms of innovation, Vancouver tends to be ahead of the curve. In terms of the rest of Canada, honestly, it was the first fully automated driverless rapid transit system in Canada back in 1985. And for context, the first part of the O train wasn't even built until 2001. The Skybridge is also a really cool feature of the Skytrain. It is a 1,616 meter cable-stayed bridge that was built exclusively for the Skytrain and was the first of its kind. Vancouver also does a really good job of engaging with the public and communicating its plans, which we've already established Ottawa can work on. In terms of safety, the Ottawa police reported 5 to 6 crimes per 100,000 trips between 2021 and 2022. The Vancouver Transit Police reported between 0.9 and 1.4 crimes per 100,000 boardings in the same time frame. Take these numbers with a huge grain of salt though. There is so much variability in the way that crime is reported and categorized. Like the statistics for Ottawa are per 100,000 trips versus in Vancouver they are per 100,000 boardings, and those aren't necessarily the same things. They're just the data that I could find on the internet. These also look at the systems as a whole rather than reporting just on their trains. I really didn't have time to dig further into the safety features of each system, but there also wasn't anything super notable when I did do the quick search that I did. The O train had an average of 104,800 riders per weekday in Q1 of 2025, whereas the Skytrain had 444,900 riders per weekday also in Q1 of 2025. So Vancouver has double the metro population, but more than quadruple the ridership on its trains compared to Ottawa. Man, this is such a comically unfair comparison. So now that I've compared all 6 major transit systems in Canada, stay tuned for a mega ranking video, and I'm almost at my destination, so subscribe if you want to see where I end up.